Welcome to the Elvis Presley Channel. The relationship between Ann-Margret and Elvis Presley began as a love affair in 1963 and lasted until Presley died in 1977. Even though the two legendary actors met when they co-starred in Viva Las Vegas, they married separate spouses, Roger Smith and Priscilla Presley, respectively. They remained friends for the rest of Presley's life. Ann-Margret reflected on her friendship with the King of Rock and Roll in her 1994 memoir, Ann-Margret, My Story. She also reflected on the sad day she found out about his untimely death. This makes us wonder if the King of Rock and Roll would have lived longer if he had remained with Ann-Margret. Keep watching the video to find out more, and do not forget to like this video as well. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Could Ann-Margret save Elvis Presley? Ann-Margret was born in a little hamlet of lumberjacks and farmers near the Arctic Circle, where she grew up. Her father worked in the United States as a child and emigrated to the United States in 1942 to work for Johnson Electric. 4 years later, Ann-Margret and her mother relocated to America. Elvis and she started dating while they were filming Viva Las Vegas. For obvious reasons, Priscilla Ann Bewley was the one who feared the couple's heated romance the most. Then she was merely an 18-year-old teenager who had recently graduated from high school and lived discreetly at Graceland. Ann-Margret was Priscilla's polar opposite. She listened, she could dance, sing, and she was sultry, yet she was also bashful and devoted to her family. You could make jokes at her, and she would make jokes back. She was a hot and beautiful thing with a lot of pizzazz. She was smart and humble, and she rode a bike. It's no surprise that Elvis Presley was smitten with her. He couldn't help but fall in love with her. Her memoirs make it plain that they were head over heels in love. She doesn't express it in as many words as he does, but she says it plainly, and they meant a lot to each other. They were in love with each other. They probably wouldn't be able to keep it up, but they had a genuine connection. They were able to communicate because they were both from smaller towns. They had a passion for motorcycles and were both uncomfortable in the limelight of Hollywood, and we believe that was the glue that held them together throughout Elvis's life. My interpretation is that we should all be as fortunate as Ann-Margret and Elvis Presley in having a friendship as important as theirs. Ann-Margret was the most important woman in Elvis Presley's life outside of his family. She became the most famous of Elvis Presley's leading ladies after starring opposite him in Viva Las Vegas in 1963. During Presley's Hollywood career, their relationship proved a fairy tale interlude in his strange life narrative, which ended tragically in 1977. The Swedish immigrant first encountered Elvis Presley on a sound stage at the radio recording studios in Hollywood in early July 1963. They were introduced to one another and the press as the stars of MGM's upcoming picture, Viva Las Vegas, on that day. It was Presley's 14th picture at the time, while Ann-Margret's career was just getting started at the age of 22. Her prior picture, Bye Bye Birdie, which was released just 3 months before she began shooting on Viva Las Vegas, gained her an instant celebrity. The Ann-Margret story, according to Birdie cast member Dick Van Dyke, would have been a better title for the film. Except for a piano, the MGM soundstage where Elvis and I met was empty, Ann-Margret recalled in her 1994 autobiography. Under the cautious gaze of director George Sidney, a handful of his crew hovered around in the background, monitoring their boss, a ritual I would soon learn to expect. A studio photographer captured what the bosses of the film business thought would be an historic event. "I'd like you to meet a great young lady named Ann-Margret," George Sidney said to Elvis Presley. "This is Elvis Presley, Ann-Margret." Elvis and I were completely unaware of the significance. We both laughed and broke the ice as I held out my hand and he gently shook it. "I've heard a lot about you," we both replied at the same time. The meeting was not only the start of the couple's working connection, but it was also the start of a personal one. After all, this was Elvis Presley, a man who had grabbed the hearts of practically every woman in America, Ann-Margret observed. I had no idea he was on his way to capturing mine. The two had to record their musical numbers before filming could begin. On the 9th and 10th of July they each recorded their songs on radio recorders. They then went into the studio together on July 11th to work on 3 duets, The Lady Loves Me, You're the Boss, and Today, Tomorrow and Forever. The cast and crew arrived in Las Vegas 3 days later and checked into the Sahara Hotel. Filming in the city began on July 15th and lasted until July 26th. The alliance was working, Ann-Margret could tell. I'm sure the producers realised that the fast-paced boy meets girl musical would benefit greatly if Lucky and Rusty's chemistry was right. Elvis and I may have admitted that the only heat between us emanated from the scorching desert sun at first, but others noticed sparks right away. It was immediately clear to everyone. They held hands, they'd slip into dressing rooms between shooting, and they lunched together in privacy, according to a journalist. The energy of the music attracted her and Elvis together immediately, since we experienced music in the same visceral way, Ann-Margret said. Elvis Presley and I both experienced an unusual, awkward, amusing, inspirational and amazing sensation when music rekindled a smouldering pent-up passion within us. We observed virtual mirror pictures of one another when we looked at each other. When Elvis slammed his pelvis against mine, I slammed forward as well. I was down there with him when his shoulder dropped. I was already on my heels as he whirled. As they collaborated, Ann-Margret gained an understanding of Elvis's Memphis Mafia. In addition to the music, Ann-Margret claims they discovered a lot in common. Elvis invited her to visit a show in Las Vegas with him and the boys early in the filming. It was a simple and pleasant date. She remembered, I was used to having my parents accompany me on dates, so Elvis's entourage wasn't a problem. His guys always treated me wonderfully. In return, Elvis's buddies always felt comfortable when she was around. She made his life a little easier, because she understood him and didn't make any demands on him, Elvis's cousin Billy Smith recalled. She even understood his need for us. Priscilla never understood that. Anne genuinely enjoyed people, and she liked every one of us, Marty Lacker noted. We didn't make her feel frightened or intimidated. I believe she admired us as well. With her we used to have a lot of fun. She has a fantastic sense of humour. We called her Rusty because of her red hair and the moniker she had in the movie. Elvis, on the other hand, began to spend more time alone with her as he grew more comfortable with Ann-Margret. When Elvis Presley asked to be alone with me, I felt I'd entered uncharted terrain. However, the frequency with which it occurred subsequently made me joyful. It meant Elvis had complete faith in me. Elvis opened up to her more than he ever had to anyone else in his life during their private time together. She had the impression that she, like everyone else, had come to know his heart intimately. Elvis Presley had dreams and desires, hopes and hurts, needs and flaws. He didn't show his vulnerable side until after everyone had left. Until those private moments after darkness had enveloped the city, and we'd parked somewhere up in the hills and could stare down on the sprawl of L.A. or up at the stars when we were alone. During the Viva Las Vegas filming, their egos were the only thing that threatened their partnership. No one can deny that Ann-Margret had one, and no one can deny that Elvis Presley did as well. One example is the alleged favouritism director George Sidney showed to Ann-Margret during filming. Sidney was accused by Elvis's cronies Red West, Lamar Fike, Joe Esposito and Sonny West of giving Ann-Margret favourable camera views at the expense of Elvis. According to Presley historian Peter Gorlick, Elvis's accusations were passed on to Colonel Parker, who took Sidney to task. The producers were challenged by the Colonel, who reminded them that this was an Elvis Presley film. He didn't believe MGM's claim that starring Ann-Margret would bring in a larger audience. According to Goralnik, Parker exploited his influence to remove 2 of the 3 duets recorded by the 2 stars from the film. When seeing the final cut of Viva Las Vegas, it's evident that Elvis Presley received the greatest musical attention. He has 6 solo numbers to Ann's 2. Margaret's dancing prowess was showcased naturally, yet Viva Las Vegas comes across as an Elvis Presley film, with Ann-Margret as a powerful leading lady. None of the pro-Presley accusers pointed the finger at Ann-Margret, and she didn't discuss the matter in her book. Elvis's professional jealousy over the camera angle controversy did not bleed over into his relationship with Ann-Margret. By all accounts, it swiftly turned into a full-fledged love affair. Elvis's affair with Ann-Margret was more than an affair, Lamar Fike stated. He was head over heels in love with her. Neither one of them was married, Marty Lacker continued, and they truly cared a lot about each other, and Priscilla was back at Graceland. Margaret, for her part, focused on the motorcycle rides and other adventures they experienced as close friends in her book, rather than the passionate aspects of her relationship with Elvis. Even so, it's clear that their close relationship persisted long after the filming of Viva Las Vegas was completed. Jerry Schilling claimed in his book that in the fall of 1964 Ann-Margret entered Elvis's California home late at night with her key and made her way up to Elvis's bedroom. Marty Lacker alleges she used to write him letters signed Bunny or Thumper, and that she called Graceland using the same code. Elvis knew I adored pink and had commissioned a round pink bed in a moment of affection, Ann-Margret admitted in her memoir. Elvis, on the other hand, had to keep his word, at least according to Ann-Margret. Their love affair had to come to an end. There were other elements in Elvis's life that pulled him apart from me, she wrote in her memoirs. They were now clear to me. Even though Elvis had always been truthful with me, the situation was nonetheless perplexing. We continued to see one another regularly until we had been dating for about a year, at which point everything came to a standstill. We understood the relationship had to come to an end, and Elvis had to keep his word. That promise was to marry Priscilla in Las Vegas on May 1st, 1967, and Margaret made a similar commitment a week later in the same location when she married actor Roger Smith. In 1967, Ann-Margret married fellow movie star Roger Smith, and the two went on to have one of the longest marriages in Hollywood history. Smith died in 2017, a year after the couple celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Elvis and Ann-Margret were good and faithful friends for the next 10 years of his life. Elvis sent her a guitar-shaped floral arrangement when she made her maiden appearance on the Las Vegas stage in June 1967. For the remainder of his life, he sent flowers for all of her Las Vegas openings. Ann-Margret was in the audience when Elvis Presley performed at the International Hotel on July 31, 1969. According to Lamar Fike, during the 1970s, they would go to each other's Las Vegas shows whenever feasible and visit afterward. Both struggled with addiction issues in the 1970s, while Elvis Presley took prescription drugs. Ann-Margret battled alcoholism. "I'd drink a fifth of scotch, pass out, wake up, drink some more, then pass out again," she explained. "I had periods where I couldn't remember what I was doing." Elvis didn't overcome his addiction like Ann-Margret did. She first heard stories regarding Elvis Presley's deteriorating health in early 1977. When she asked Joe Esposito how Elvis Presley was doing when he attended her show at the Tropicana in Las Vegas, he said everything was fine. There were a few issues, but they were quickly resolved. For the first time in 10 years, there was no flower arrangement or telegram from Elvis when she opened the Hilton on August 15, 1977. When Ann-Margret was filming a TV special in Nashville in March 1977 and didn't hear from Presley, who was just a hop, skip and a jump away in Memphis, she was perplexed and anxious. She'd also heard through the grapevine that he'd stopped touring and had taken up residence at Graceland. A phone call from Graceland the next morning delivered the awful news. Ann-Margret was heartbroken when she learned of Presley's death. Her husband, Roger Smith, even told her dancers and backstage team to keep an eye on her for the 2 gigs she still had to perform at the Hilton that night. Soon after, Smith and Ann-Margret flew to Memphis to attend Presley's funeral. She recalls hugging and crying with Vernon Presley, Presley's bereaved father, as well as numerous members of the Memphis Mafia with whom she had become close. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis Presley's manager, even invited Ann-Margret to host the 2-hour NBC tribute to the king of rock and roll after his death. "I'll never be able to get over Elvis's death," Ann-Margret wrote in her memoir on her lengthy friendship with Presley. "He is a part of me, both happy and sad, and that will never change. It's unusual to have a soulmate like Elvis, and it's even rarer to have such a friend." Indeed, Ann-Margret has spoken of Presley with nothing but affection and fondness over the years. Their romantic relationship may have been fleeting, but their friendship certainly made an indelible impression on both of them. Ann-Margret flew to Memphis in early 1979 after learning that Vernon Presley was severely ill. "We had a fantastic visit, laughing and crying and sharing stories," she remembered. "He told me how much he missed his son, and I told him how much I missed him to comfort him." During the months running up to his death on June 26, 1979, she called Vernon on occasion. "If Elvis had ended up with Thumper, this whole story may have wound up differently," Marty Lacker, one of Elvis's best men at his wedding, once wrote. Do you think Ann-Margret could have saved Elvis? It seemed to everyone that Elvis and Ann-Margret were the perfect couple, so why did they go their separate ways? Watch this video to know why Ann-Margret knew she had to break up with Elvis.